how do they interact to create a macroeconomy. Economists have two roles. One role is as scientist, and the other role is as policy advisor. Sometimes we're asked to explain the world. Other times we're asked to make a suggestion on what to do next. Now we have two kinds of roles, which gives us two sets of tasks. And in understanding the difference, it's helpful to look at the distinction between positive economics and normative economics. Positive economics is the science, where we consider a hypothesis, we test the hypothesis, and then we evaluate whether we continue to believe, we accept or reject the hypothesis. That is science. So positive, we think we posit a hypothesis. We make a prediction about how we think the world works. We take data, we apply data to the problem, and see what we come up with. It's very much descriptive. Normative analysis is proscriptive. Normative analysis, what we do is we try to decide how we think the world ought to be, or how it should be. For instance, if we examine what would happen if we raised the tax on alcohol, the scientist would say, if we raise the tax on alcohol, we expect that people would drink less alcohol. The normative economist would perhaps say, since alcohol has so many bad outcomes, that raising the tax on alcohol would be a good policy. Or perhaps the person would say that raising the tax on alcohol inhibits trade and inhibits personal freedoms, and thus it makes a bad policy. But the point is that the science part, the positive part, is about testing hypotheses and explaining how the world works. The normative part, the policy advisor part, is about trying to make suggestions on how things should be and how the world should operate. Economics is a social science that relies on the scientific method. The scientific method involves a number of steps. The first is to devise a theory. We observe things in the world and we come up with a theory to explain them, or a hypothesis. From then we collect data. We gather information about what we see and what we expect to see. And then we analyze the data in a way to either refute or provide some evidence for our hypothesis. And once we do that, we add to the body of knowledge that's out there. So the scientific method essentially starts with a theory. It starts with an explanation. It moves next to data. Does the data support the theory? And then finally, we add to the body of knowledge by concluding that we either accept or reject the theory. For instance, economists for many years have had a theory of inflation that says that if the money supply rises, we expect prices to rise or inflation to rise. This is a theory. We test this with data. We use data from various countries, from various periods of time to test this thing. For a long time, the link between the money supply and inflation was much stronger than it seems to be today. As we gather data at the end of the Great Recession period, the link between printing more money and seeing prices rise is perhaps confusing or not as clear as it used to be. And this means that we need to collect more data. We need to analyze it more carefully, and we need to test our theory to see what we continue to believe. It's very difficult for social scientists to construct experiments in the lab, although this is changing. There's a field of behavioral economics that is trying to do some more of this. But historically, economics has been a study has been a discipline that's relied on real-world data to generate and test hypotheses. On the model to test the economy, we make assumptions. Right? When we test a theory, we make assumptions. We try to narrow it down to a manageable measure of parameters. We make some assumptions. We try to make our events and systems easier to understand. And in building models of the economy, we certainly simplify things. We simplify things to get down to the key element, the number one thing that we're interested in. For instance, if we want to analyze international trade, we might construct a model that assumes a world with two countries and two goods. In some cases, this might be problematic, but it provides a simple model that can go a very long distance towards explaining the important pieces of international trade. By